on staging this other development where Rand Paul has taken himself out of the race. Denise, thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Neil.
Well, with Rand Paul out, say what you will of his rather tepid support in Iowa, among college students in particular, libertarians in general, he had rabid support. It didn't show up necessarily in Iowa, but it was palpable among some of his young supporters. Maybe they just didn't show up, or maybe their support was sort of spread out among other candidates. Ted Cruz might be a beneficiary, hard to say. But he didn't have enough money to keep the race going on. Rebecca Berg now, on how that does change the complexion of this race from her vantage point at Real Clear Politics. What do you think now that it was ultimately money that might have forced the senator to say, all right, enough, I can't keep going?
Well, Neil, we see that in a number of races. When your polling stagnates, when you're not getting any momentum, your donors decide maybe they should be putting their money elsewhere. It's like any investment that you would make. Why invest in a company that is not doing well, that's not on the rise? Same with candidates. So these donors want to put their money where it could actually have a chance of success. And that's what Rand Paul was seeing in his race.
You know, I also think it's a matter of the cushion you have. In other words, how much cash on hand do you have? That's why I didn't give much credence even caucus night, Rebecca, when we heard this talk that Ben Carson was going to go back to Florida to get a fresh set of clothes. I always find that to be a stupid argument anyway, because given the cost of an airline ticket and waiting time and everything else, just buy some new underwear or whatever, wherever you are. But I digress. But having said that, I didn't buy it for this reason. He has a lot of money in the bank, a lot of cash on hand. His campaign just came off the month of December, hauling more than $23 million, more than any other candidate. That doesn't mean he has the most cash on hand, but he doesn't have to worry about cash on hand. So I don't see any reason, even with his own poor performance in Iowa, for him to drop out. Rand Paul, a different story. So who else is vulnerable?
Well, right now, a lot of people actually. Ben Carson, as you pointed out, does have money in the bank, but one of his problems has been really financial mismanagement in his campaign. He has a high burn rate. He has to spend a lot of money to make the money that he is bringing in, so he's using expensive fundraising tactics. And whether that's sustainable past South Carolina is a question that I think we're going to be asking in the days and weeks to come. So he is certainly vulnerable, but you look at some of these other candidates. Rick Santorum does not have much money in the bank. In fact, his campaign is in debt. So he's another who I would be watching. Carly Fiorina actually has been doing pretty well in terms of fundraising because her campaign is being run essentially through her super PAC, which is a whole other discussion entirely. She could probably last for a little while more. On the flip side, though, you look at Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. They are doing a really stupendous job fundraising. Ted Cruz, I would say, is the undisputed leader right now among Republicans in terms of fundraising.
And Rebecca, is Ted Cruz the beneficiary of all these people who are falling out, or most of the votes of all those who would be falling out, even if none of them outright say they support him? That if you're a supporter of a Rand Paul, if you're a supporter of a Mike Huckabee, that you are more inclined to veer to Cruz, or what?
Well, for those two candidates, I would say yes, absolutely. Mike Huckabee, very popular among evangelical Republicans. Those were obviously a huge part of Ted Cruz's support in Iowa. And Rand Paul, obviously more of a libertarian-leaning candidate. And Ted Cruz has been making actually very explicit appeals to libertarians in his campaign. And so you will see a lot of his supporters go to Ted Cruz. But actually, the fact is, Ted Cruz has already swept up a lot of these donors, and that is why you saw candidates like Mike Huckabee and Rand Paul struggling.
All right, Rebecca, thank you very much. Rebecca Berg.
Thank you, Neil.
I'd be remiss